Good evening. This is the monthly HR call. Are there any public comments on the agenda? No? All right, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Mrs. Plant. This evening on the agenda under new business, I'm asking for a board policy review of board policy number 324, personnel files. This is a new policy that has been recommended by PSBA. It is intended to have a first reading on our April 18th, 2024 public board meeting and a second reading and adoption possibly at the May 2024 reading. This particular policy governs personnel files at all classifications of employees and regulates that the district require and keep sufficient records for all employees to include their qualifications for the job being held, compliance with all federal and state requirements, local benefit programs, conformance with our board's policies, administrative regulations, rules and procedures, and evidence of those completed evaluations. It also mandates that there are specific guidelines of us keeping medical records separate from employee personnel records, so they are kept in completely separate file cabinets. And employees have the availability to review at any time their own personnel records. It requires that they contact the HR office, schedule a meeting with us. They're placed in a private area where they're permitted to review all personnel records in their own file, and then they may ask us for copies of anything in the file that they wish to have copies of. Sometimes employees will ask for things like copies of their clearances, maybe copies of their transcripts, or resume, or whatever it may be that they would like to have access to. Any questions about this particular policy? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to discussions of topic. This evening, I'd like to review our hiring process, and we are about to enter into our peak hiring period, which always occurs late spring, early summer for what is our new positions that we anticipate as a result of resignations, retirements, and then ultimately any possible new positions that might be added in the upcoming budget for the following school year. That process is very intentional, it's very purposeful and thorough, and you'll see attached here on tonight's agenda particular document where we've outlined all of the steps that take place in our hiring process. Please know that we use an online system called Talent Ed for our applicants, to apply to positions that have been posted. You probably have seen that we've posted some already that we've been given notification of for those resignations and retirements. Our interview process includes screening to take place by our building principals, content areas, special education supervisors, and our equity and advancement officer. There are several steps in the interview process. The first round of interviews taking place by the building principal, content area special ed supervisors, and equity advancement officer when possible. Pre-screened interview applicants are done initially and then presented requests of names to the HR office. The HR office will review the applicants and determine their eligibility based on their clearances that they've submitted, but also their certifications. Certifications are checked with PDE's site to make sure that they are valid and in the correct content area. And also just that they have proper credentialing before they are sent forward for the interviewing process. Once first interview rounds have taken place, recommendations for second rounds will be sent over to the HR office. Our elementary level of interview process includes demonstration lessons scheduled with our building principals, content area or special education supervisors, when possible, and if available and appropriate in those interviews. And our content area specialists will supply the lesson plan and the curricular guidelines for the candidates that will take place. At the secondary level, it looks the same, with the exception of just different content and different particular lessons at PDE's level. Recommendations for third round are then sent again to the HR office. A minimum of 2 applicants for each posted position are referred for our third round. The building principals must complete 3 reference checks using a standard HR form that we have for each applicant in order for them to move forward to round 3. A minimum of 1 of those reference checks must be done by the current and direct supervisor of that candidate that's to be interviewed. Recommendations for those completed interview reference checks are then sent to HR and then forwarded for interviews with either the director of curriculum or the pupil services director and building principals for round 3. Those interviews are not scheduled unless we have all 3 references. Final round of interviews are the directors making a recommendation based on their third round interviews that are recommended for a final candidate or 2 finalists to move forward with Dr. Christian, superintendent. And then also, as part of our hiring practice, the credentials that are included and reviewed and also sent along to Dr. Christian for final review in the hiring process is the candidate's application, the resume that they have submitted, certification for their content area. We have reviewed all Act 48 or 45 credits and verified that they are in good standing with PDE. We've checked all clearances, all required 3 clearances that the Pennsylvania Department of Ed requires, 3 reference checks, 1 from a direct supervisor, all college or university transcripts, salary information, and any other pertinent information for Dr. Christian's review so that he may make a consideration for hire. Can I answer any questions about the interview process?
Michelle, could you just go through
Sure.
the process of Act 168 and what's required?
Happy to. Act 168 came about as in, I believe, 2011, and that particular process includes, I stand corrected, 2014. That particular process includes that an applicant must submit a standard form that's been created by the Department of Ed, and it is related to sexual misconduct or abuse, and it's a disclosure form. This is completed individually, separately, for the applicants wherever they have had any contact with children, regardless of whether it was a public school district, a parochial, private, a YMCA where they might have worked as a counselor, a preschool, wherever it may have been. And the applicant is required to fill in their private information and answer yes, no, excuse me, my apologies. Yes, no to 3 specific questions that are asked of the candidate, specific to whether or not they have ever been disciplined or discharged by that employer in any sexual misconduct related to children. That is then forwarded to the employer, and the employer must answer subsequently those very same 3 questions with yes, no responses, and or verify that that person has never been employed by them and they don't have records. And then that is submitted back to the district for final review and consideration as part of the hiring process.
This is a critical step in the hiring process because it includes not only employees who may have been convicted but investigated for anything related to child safety. And so this process, while it elongates our hiring process, it's a necessary step because even if you've been investigated, it causes a potential challenge. The reason this law was enacted because there were districts who, for whatever reason, suspected an employee maybe of some sort of malfeasance, especially related to the abuse of a child, and allowed the employee to resign and then did not share the information as to why they resigned. Sadly, there are multiple cases out there, all published on the PDE website. And so, in addition to the state police, the fingerprint, the child welfare, that Act 168 is critical. And then it ties back to our timeline because we've posted jobs now. And the board is well aware of the decrease in the number of teachers being certified on an annual basis. Most districts are going to be hiring in July and August. Our goal is to do most of our hiring somewhat optimistically in May, but the reality would be June, and get the positions we know that are being vacated filled now, so we have time to do all these clearances and all these checks. So if we think we have a great match for a job, we just have to dot our I's and cross our T's. Because there's always a surprise. Somebody may resign in August for whatever reason. They decide to retire, their spouse gets transferred, whatever, they decide to seek new employment elsewhere. My first year here in 2017-18, we hired 44 teachers in August. 44. And they ended up being very good teachers, but that's like a nightmare for any board. We want it to be like 3 or 4 in August when you have 400, 500 employees. We don't do most of our hiring, so I asked Michelle to go through this so that you all know that the candidates have been properly vetted by the time they get to you through our multi-pronged approach and all of the additional clearances, plus the additional reference checks. Nothing replaces the value of calling the current supervisor and having a conversation about the employee. Nothing replaces that, but we have to do all the other things. And no finalist moves forward to my office, and then Michelle and I do not recommend anyone that we haven't met personally. And we always have 2 to 3 candidates for every position. So because we're in competition with other districts, if we lose somebody, we have somebody ready to go. So it's a thorough yet aggressive process that we follow.
Mike, real quick, a question on that, and then I have another question about something you reviewed earlier, Michelle. So the first question on the Act 168, what part of the process is this 168, Act 168 done?
That part of the process takes place when the candidates become finalists. So when we know that this person is intended to be hired is when they will complete the Act 168 so that we can start to send them out, because then it's putting the other employers on notice that this individual is in the finalist process and considered for hire. Oftentimes you wait to that point because the person is still employed and you want to be sure that they are a viable candidate.
It has to be at the end because the lag is too, if we did it when there were like 10 candidates left, it's just too long of a lag, because let's say they worked in 2 or 3 places. As much as we'd like to hear they get back to us as quickly as possible, they don't. And so we wait until we're down to those last couple candidates and we send out the 168s. Just, it would cause too much of a delay.
Okay, that was going to be the second part of the question.
And we say all this, we sound like we're sounding the alarm. 99% of the folks are fine. But every once in a while, you get a candidate who had a problem somewhere. And you can't control how the other entity handled the situation. Right. And that's why the language on the 168 is very explicit. It's not accused, it's not just convicted, it's investigated. Mm-hmm. And that, of grooming or something more serious, that's where yes, they've been investigated. That's why we have 2 or 3 candidates. You could get to, you might not, that case, if they've been or under investigation, might not be resolved for a year or 2. Well, we're not going to take the chance of inheriting that problem.
Got it. And then, Michelle, my other question was about something earlier in the process where you mentioned that the director of curriculum supplies, or the principal supplies the lessons plans and the curriculum to the candidates. Is that because part of the interview process is to ask them to do a lesson plan? Are they doing it based off of what we've provided, or are they doing it just based off of their experience and expertise?
the candidate is completing and providing a demo lesson, a mini demo lesson as part of their second round interview that is based on PDE standards. So our curriculum content supervisors and or special education supervisors will select one that's appropriate for the area of the content of the position that we're hiring for, whether it's the middle school, the high school, elementary, and they will determine based on PDE standards which one is appropriate and ask them to provide a mini lesson on that particular content.
And we do that in front of our students who provide the greatest feedback you could ever imagine. Do you engage kids? And so the principal will go in after the teacher, the candidate does their demo, and the principal and the curriculum supervisor and the teacher will say, "What'd you think?" And the kids, they know they're not hiring people, but they give their feedback. Particularly in middle school and high school, it's very valuable.
So I just have a question. If someone is investigated on the 168, but it's found not a credible thing, does that just go away, or does it have to be documented? Do we discredit that application?
It all depends how that district chooses to report it moving forward. So let's say we find out that a candidate was invested or is under investigation, and we choose not to invest in that candidate because we have another one. Maybe they're exonerated and there's nothing to it. There's nothing on us because we just, through our hiring process, went with another candidate. But let's say 2 years later, it's up to that district that's responding to the 168 how they choose to check the boxes when they get the form.
Chris.
Our approach is we tell the truth. So if you've been investigated, we check you've been investigated. It could be fruitless, but that's just the reality it is, because if you get, you can't lie. It's just the result. So we certainly want to protect our employees, but people always say to me, what keeps you up at night in your job? They think it's snow days. It's not. That keeps me up 3 or 4 nights a week. COVID kept me up a lot, kept us all up a lot. What keeps me up at night is the fact that when we hire a teacher who's 22 years old, they're going to be teaching the next 35 years in our district and impacting the lives of thousands of kids. That's what keeps me up at night. I'd love to tell you I'm batting 1,000 and everybody that we've hired has been perfect. And we've hired a lot of great people. But every once in a while, you hire people that you need to move on from. But that's what keeps HR departments and superintendents and boards up at night. The impact of hiring somebody for 35 years. And snow days. And eclipse days.
You're only allowed to have one on that list.
Is the investigation and or the conviction of a candidate an automatic disqualification?
Depends upon what we can find out when we get the document back. Michelle, fortunately, has got a lot of connections in the county and surrounding counties, as do I. So we'll call and find out if the investigation had merit or not. If we get any sense of hesitation from the people we call, then it could be a disqualifier, Gail. But if they say, no, it was falsehood, but we had to report it, then we'll take the risk. And we extend the same courtesy if we have a teacher who leaves us when they're filling it out. You get calls all the time from other HR directors, as do I. Hey, we're looking at this candidate. They're from your district, and you want to be a good neighbor. You hate to lose employees, but if they choose to apply, you have to be honest. But we will be coming to the board in May and June, I'm sure, for positions, and we'll always supply in executive session. The board will get copies of all the resumes, where they went to school, the position they applied for. We'll provide all of that beforehand so you can see. And if you have questions of Michelle or me or Rosemary or Karen, then we'll make sure we get those answers to you.
And I was going to ask as a follow-up to that, and maybe I should probably know this, but does the board approve all teacher hiring or all hiring?
Administration recommends, board approves. Our goal is by the time you see all the candidates, if you've had any questions, when we go to approve them, you're ready to approve.
I just wanted to be clear, is this only for teachers or does this include support staff too? So a cafeteria worker?
All employees
Bus
at all
drivers.
levels, from the superintendent on down.
Thank you.
Every. Good question.
Can that get added to this, or?
I specifically outlined for you the process of our professional staff, meaning our certified teaching staff. You wanted me to add to this document particularly about clearances or the very bottom part. Mark, can you scroll down?
All of the clearances, everything we talked about that applies to all public school employees.
Yes.
The direct hiring for our aides and for our custodial staff, the final interview is with their department head. Like Joe will see all the Teamsters, all the custodians, grounds crew. Chris and Mark will see bus drivers. Principals will see paraprofessionals. They all have to go through HR. The professional staff comes to my office prior to going to see Karen or Rosemary. But I want the folks that report directly to Joe to see Joe. Like, you don't want to see me interviewing somebody who has to use a wrench, because if you saw me use a wrench, you'd understand why I'm in this role and not that role. So, yeah, Joe knows the folks that are ready to work for him, and that's why he needs to recommend them.
We approve them on an ad hoc basis, or?
A monthly board meeting, the personnel
Okay,
report will
sorry.
have professional support,
Yes.
et cetera, all listed.
Sorry,
I just wanted you all to know the criteria to get into working in the public school system. And all that said, there are situations that occur where we get an applicant who, let's say they're 30 years old, and when they were 17 or 18, made a mistake. There are violations to those clearances that may appear that are not disqualifiers to being employed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we take a look at that, and if somebody made a mistake when they were 18 or 19 that is not a significant transgression, check with the solicitor. It doesn't bar them from employment. And maybe they've been a sub for us for a little while. We know they've put in the good work. We're all about providing opportunity, provided, we know who the individual is and we think they're a good match. So, you may not believe this, but it did happen. I had somebody who applied to be a bus driver in my former setting who had committed like several felonies using a motor vehicle. And I just was like, that's the wrong job for you to apply to. Like, and it does happen. They're like, oh, I know this job. I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to drive kids. So those things do occur. But we've had a few employees that had minor transgressions, 10 years or older, and you look past them because everybody grows and matures. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but there are certain things that preclude you from being that extreme example being one of them.
Mike, sorry, can you clarify something? You said, you just mentioned public school. So this Act 168 is for public schools only? It's not for PA across the board?
It applies to public school, charter schools, but I can't speak to non-public. That's up to them.
So when doing the 168, if the candidate is coming from a private
Oh,
school,
no, we'll send
they
it to
still have
we'll send it to
okay,
every,
all
I'm
right.
sorry, yeah. No, we'll send it out to
Okay,
everyone.
okay.
Yep. And then Michelle's office will they're chasing down those forms like crazy.
Yes.
Like you can have people that work for 4 previous employers. We'll get 3 back in a week. And then I'll say, come on, we got to hire this teacher. Let's go. And she'll say, we're waiting on one.
Right.
And so you're on the phone trying to get a hold of them.
There might be a board member who wants one. The good thing about working in the county and having such great connections as Mike and I do with our colleagues in the county is if they see my name pop up on one of these forms and they know that I'm waiting for someone to hire, they will bounce it right back to me within an hour via email and get it back to me that quickly. And I will do the same for them, same courtesy. If it happens to be a parochial or private, it is a little bit harder to get those back sometime.
Now, so if they're coming from out of state, so is the recipient on the other end required to complete this document, even if they're coming from out of state,
Yes,
if the candidates?
yes. And
They
sometimes,
are, but like, what's the enforcement if they don't?
right.
Like, presently, we're looking for 2 science teachers at the secondary level due to retirement, social studies due to retirement, special education due to retirement. I know foreign language,
Spanish, you're correct.
Spanish. So the 2 sciences and the Spanish, the principals were in over the break interviewing. And not that social studies isn't important, it is. It's just there's a lot of social studies candidates out there, but the sciences and the foreign language, we need to get people now, because think about it, if we hire somebody in July or August and they're working for another district, under the Pennsylvania statute, the district that we're hiring them from can hold them for 60 days. So if we hire somebody August 6th, we're not going to get them until October. And we can't have that. Like, our kids will be here in September. So, special ed's difficult, foreign language difficult, sciences are difficult. So that's why we posted in advance of the April board meeting so we can get rolling.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Any public comment? No. All right. Well, this adjourns the HR meeting for Monday, April 1st. Yes. Thank you.
All right. At this time, we would like to start the facilities meeting. Is there any public comment? No public comment. And Mr. Lally, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Will. Good evening, everyone. I think as you drove in, you could probably see that we started the renovation project over at the Colonial Elementary School. Things are happening fast and furious, as they always do at the beginning of a project. So the gym has the dividing door up, and it's quarantined from the students. And, first day was separating controls with air conditioning and lighting and making sure that we could obviously keep the gym functioning for the students on one side one way, and then on the other side where we're actually doing the construction. We don't need those things at this point. But believe it or not, the bleachers on that one side of the wall are just about gone already. So the gym already looks a lot different. But I think it was just important to try and start explaining to the board some of the things you're seeing. We're working with the principal closely to make sure arrival and dismissal goes smoothly every day, and the contractors know the rules that we've set forth and that they're abiding by those rules. And one of them things that we just kind of talked about was every contractor has to go through all their clearances. So the same thing happens for the contractors. They all have to have clearances, and then their clearances actually come up to our office, and then we vet them through Tim McDonald. And Tim will see all the contractors. And again, same kind of thing that we're doing with Michelle and employees. If there's something that disqualifies them, then we ask them to leave the job site, and they can't work on the job. But everyone that is approved has an armband. Like the electricians will have an armband with their name on it, and they have a blue sticker with a number. And then on the back of it, it'll actually say their company's name. So they're wearing armbands for safety, because lanyards wouldn't be safe for anyone in construction. So all the contractors, and again, we kind of learned through the middle school. We tried the helmet sticker, but not everybody wore their helmet. And so we figured the armband's safe. That seemed to catch on and work at the middle school. So that's what we're doing here. So I just want to let everyone know that, contractor-wise, everyone's been vetted. We will continue to go through more of that process as contractors use subcontractors and more people get added to the pot here, and we start doing more work. But the reality will be everybody will go through those same clearances. before they're allowed to work in the building. What I can tell you is they started demolition on the second floor, which I don't know how many of you ever got up to see that, but if you didn't, you didn't miss anything because it'll look totally different when we're done. But again, it's exciting that we're here now. Now it's time to get to work. And so we did a kickoff meeting, and we're going to have our normal, every 2 weeks we have a meeting, which will be more about scheduling and where we are and ASIs and things like that of that nature. And then in between that, you have an actual, every other week on the other side of that, you have a coordination meeting, which is basically just contractors meeting with each other to say, hey, you got to run that wire because I got to put my ductwork up. That type of coordination that you might miss on site. Because again, I think we all went through, it's a multi-prime project. So the reality is the district is hiring all 4 of the primes. So they work directly for the district. So it's a task, but it's a tight schedule, but I'm confident that we're going to make it and it's going to be a great project. So again, just wanted to kind of break that to everyone. And I know as more questions will come, I'm going to try and provide some pictures at my monthly meetings just to give you a lot of things so you can see some things behind the scenes that, maybe we, and if we get to a point where, we can take a tour and it's safe, I'll run that by Dr. Christian and we can actually see things. But are there any questions about construction? Excuse me?
Sorry. Will there be a point where the back lot will be blocked off?
No, never.
Okay.
Because
Yep,
the school
that's-
buses still have to go around, right?
School buses still go around. The only thing that we altered was instead of using the side door, which we call, that's the south side. So they're coming around here on the west side and grabbing the 2 back doors back here.
I have a question. As far as like the work that's going to have to happen with exterior walls, is there going to be like a false wall or like some type of retention of the dust and debris that may come?
Yes.
Like, is there like a...
It's all in their contract that they'll have to, but as they do the actual demo, you might see them. It's more piece demo, if you will. So you're not going to see like big chunks of that exterior wall fall at once and like you're imploding a building and you would say, oh my God, look at that ball of dust and it's headed towards people. It's going to be piecemeal.
Okay.
And as they bring things down, if they need to, they will water. It's in their contract and they'll try and keep dust levels down low.
Okay.
Yeah, they are completely sealed from the gym, from floor to ceiling.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
so the door's up and they're completely wrapped it in and they're on the other side. And we did just some air testing just to turn on the exhaust vents on one side to the other side, just to see our positive and negative flow to make sure we weren't getting air from that side.
Mm-hmm. When I was pulling in, I mean, obviously I saw the fence go up over like before the holiday or slightly. Like I know when my kid went on break, on his trip, I saw the fence up. I don't know, the stone, the crush or what, I don't know what you want to
That
call
they
it. It's not
have on
really
the grass?
asphalt, but it's like some kind of tar.
It's the asphalt material.
Yeah, but it's
doesn't
just not the
actually-
tar that's.
It doesn't have the tar with it, but it's
Okay.
actually asphalt material.
Now, is there like any kind of work that needs to be done to bring that back? Are we going to reclaim that, or is that going to be part of like parking lot space at some point?
That area will go back to grass at the end.
Okay.
And it's the contractor's responsibility.
Okay.
So it's all in their contract to do it. It's just because that's what they call a laydown area.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to rain and because they mobilize there, they want to make sure they can get vehicles or something in and out. So that's why they create that. And if you look, they skim coat the initial soil, which will make their job easier when they actually remove that
Okay.
layer that they put down now.
Okay.
Joe gave them several mandates. One, recess will not be interrupted for the 4 or 5 schools because this blacktop out there is where pickleball happens,
Right.
gaga, and basketball. So like it can't be impeded.
Mm-hmm.
And also viewing for baseball games this spring would not be impeded. There's a berm right there. People like to sit up there and watch the game. So the biggest inconvenience is the lot that's just on the other side of the dugout. That is where high school students who play lacrosse and other spring sports like to drive their car 400 yards from where they're parked at the high school at 2:23 and park there so they only have a short walk after practice. So we've talked to the athletic director, the high school principal. They're athletes. They can come up to practice and walk back to their cars because that area is off limits. Because the other areas will be, the staff is parking it. So if you're here at 2:30 every day, you see the migration from the high school and you see about 50 to 60 athletes move their cars. And they're great kids. They just don't need to move their cars that far.
Right. The only other question I had about the area out here, I guess you said the lay down area. Are there like heavy equipment that's going to be?
So that's a good question. At some point, there'll be some steel that will come. So if you're looking directly across if you went out this and exit here to your right, and you were looking at the side of the baseball field, there's actually a fence over there with some water pipes in the ground. There's a backfill. That's where the water supply comes in. There's going to be an emergency generator for this building on that side of the street too at some point. So right next to that area there, we'll probably lay down steel when it arrives.
Okay.
That will be it. And then the steel will actually get erected as it comes.
Okay.
But yeah, the laydown area that we discussed was taking what Dr. Christian had mentioned, which we call that the auxiliary parking lot, satellite parking lot, if you're leaving again to your right, and then the one across the street, across Colonial Drive. But we don't feel like we need that, so we left that open.
Okay. No more questions from me.
Any other questions? Okay, the second item on tonight's agenda is just a very brief update. Again, just over spring break. Again, I think Nate Barone and Gene Kelly and Tim McDonald all did a great job. I know that we all get some time to recharge the battery, but these guys and ladies and gentlemen, they work Monday through Thursday. So we did some projects that just wanted to highlight real quick that I thought was worth your time. So if you can, Mark, there was some doors at Conshohocken Elementary when we did our last lockdown that we determined were actually, they were just getting worn and they were easy to pull. So we had some doors that we purchased and we did the installation of the doors and all the hardware at Conshohocken Elementary. There was a roof drain that we did an install. We just had someone cut into the roof for us and then we put the drain in. So we noticed some ponding water at Plymouth Elementary on the roof. And again, it's just buying time for that roof again to last us a little longer so we could get some ponding water off it. The auditorium here at CES, it's very difficult to tell, but this is actually wallpaper. And what we did is we put wood trim all along the sides and the bottom and going back up because you can start to see the wallpaper was starting to curl. And rather than replace it, it's really durable and it's good in all the other sections. I thought the molding and the match that the guys did with the stain was a really nice job. Makes it look a lot better, the trim. Roof drain again. I think that you zoomed out, yeah. This is a project that'll lead, I'll show you, but this is basically just showing us we used the ditch witch to actually trench from the press box all the way over to the bathrooms at the stadium. And then we went across the blacktop and into the actual concession stand so we could put live network, not Wi-Fi, hardwired into the restroom and into the concession stand, as you can see there. They're going into the restrooms. If you can, I think they're next, Mark. You can see we purchased new doors for the restrooms up at the stadium. So there's new doors there, and those doors are going to be put on the key fob system. So it'll be just like the comfort station, where they can be on a timer, and they'll be more accessible for us now because we can leave them open without having a custodian come down, open them, unlock them. We can set them on a timer, and a key fob will get you in and out. You're looking at all the work. The guys put all new fixtures in both bathrooms. They replaced all the stalls, toilets, urinals, paper towel dispensers. Everything was replaced. Over the week, we had over at the middle school, if you remember, there was a shed that we called a hut that was at the stadium on the football field there, right by outside the track, and we had finally gotten the purchase for the new shed, which the middle school is very grateful for, and now they can actually store some equipment and some things outside again. The turf crew is pleased to let everybody know that we are ready for spring sports at the Colonial Middle School for the first time in several years. And we're looking forward to utilizing the great facility that the board approved. You can see that there were some trees here at the side of the building before the start of the project, and hard to tell now with the fenced-in area and a dumpster there, but we did internally, we dropped them trees ourselves. Again, anything we can do, we save a little bit of money by doing the work ourselves. It's something we can pull out of the contract, we try and do. The second floor here, which again was there's an area upstairs that we call the archive room. I'm really pleased Dr. Christian and Mark were really supportive with getting district administration to help clear out that area. It's going to create a lot of potential space opportunities for us while we temporarily move the offices to get some things up there on that floor for them. So again, we put some new lighting up there, made sure that the area is no longer what we were calling like a dungeon, but it's great. Everyone did a great job. The custodians, Jim Lyons and his team did a great job just getting that ready. This is just to show you that we have several desks and chairs that were from COVID, if we all recall. I apologize for saying that bad word, but yes, it was when we had to put kidney tables and things in storage to create more space for everyone, right? So we had a lot of extra desks that we made sure that we gathered and we put in storage because that can be used for some of the new classrooms here because they're adjustable legs. So again, it's just another opportunity for us to try and save a little bit of money because we have over 125 desks that were new from when we went through COVID. This was the process again with the armband for the security of the ID cards for the contractors. So you can see that the black band there, that's what goes around the arm, and then each color represents a contractor. It would have the individual's name on it, the contractor's name on the back, but then you could walk up to, Tim McDonald plans on doing his own audits and walking in, and if number one belongs to Mike Christian, and he says, hey, Mike, and he doesn't answer, we'll pretty easily know there's a problem. So the other thing that we did security-wise over the break was we moved from ExactVision. ExactVision was the app that we used for all our security cameras, and we moved to Wave. There were multiple benefits to moving to Wave. Wave actually is a one-time fee, so we're going to save quite a nice chunk of change every month where we paid ExactVision monthly. Wave is a one-time fee, but as you can read there, the pixels and the clarity and the cameras are much better. So Wave is on the two monitors to the left, and the ExactVision is on the right. Not that you can really tell in that picture, but that's just a shot of what is in Tim McDonald's office that he can see daily throughout the district. We replaced 12 of the 14 exterior cameras over the break. I think many of us talked about Zero Eyes, and I'll get to them in a second, but making our cameras compatible with the AI system obviously was a goal, and we're very comfortable that we have really good coverage right now with our outdoor cameras. There is a two-way radio system that I think we talked about many, many months ago, but I think you guys know that what the goal was with the two-way radios was that there would be communication from Colonial Elementary School to Colonial Middle School if we all go to Channel 5. So it gives us the ability, kind of like the Nextel Day, but off of the two-way radio, that we will have the ability to talk to every school. Could be critical in situations like a lockdown and things like that. Remember, we have lots of curriculum supervisors and maintenance people that are going from school to school. It'd be good if they had two-way radio to hear, hey, everyone stay away from Colonial Elementary School or what, So the ability to communicate district-wide we thought was really important. So we have the high school, we have the middle school, we have this building, and now we added White Marsh. So we hope to be done by the end of May, and the whole district will be up communicating. And then Zero Eyes came in while we were on the week of spring break, and they conducted just a test at the middle school with the Plymouth Police. So they come in with some real weapons and some false weapons, and I'm sure Dr. Christian got all the alerts on his phone. So every time that they detect something, it basically is just testing the system and telling us, this is what we got. We're making sure what's coming up on our phone on the map and on the screen tells you longitude, latitude, where they're moving, direction they're headed in. So it was just a good test for us to do in a good time because we didn't have students or teachers. So we took advantage of that. And then I believe lastly was we did replace the 3 servers that run all our cameras. It is for speed and higher quality, but it does give us a lot more memory at this point because we have added a number of cameras, specifically through the middle school project. The middle school went over 100 cameras through the project, and in the old middle school, we may have had 24. So it's substantially, so this will actually give us some memory and get us into the future, so it's extra space all the way around. But again, it's just highlighting some of the things that were done over spring break. Again, I know Nate Barone, Gene Kelly, Tim McDonald, Jim Lyons here, our entire custodial staff, everyone pretty much gets the list of things we talk about prior to spring break. What can we catch up on? What classrooms need to be cleaned? Where do we need to do some, detailed cleaning? And they really did a good job. We had a very productive week.
Thank you for that, yes.
You get it. Thank you. I will tell them.
I have two questions. First, my first question is about the security software, because you mentioned it was a one-time fee, so they're not charging us to monitor? There's no monitoring fees?
So the one-time fee in the security software, that's just camera software. So it's not Zero Eye. So it's just our camera software. So to get it on your phone and have the app apply, when we were using Exact Vision, it was a monthly payment. Mark, I forget what the actual total was of the monthly payment, but this was like a one-time fee. So again, the overall is we're saving.
Got it, thank you. And
You're
then
welcome.
my other question, I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I ask. You mentioned the bathroom renovations at the field, at the stadium, and that we now have fobs on the door and it's scheduled. So that means that when someone's renting, you guys can schedule it to be open so that if someone's renting, they still have access to the restrooms, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That gives us that opportunity for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just puts it on the key fob system. So we can set it on a schedule. And more importantly, the schedule will give us the ability to eliminate human error, because after a football game, and if you have a lot of people running, if the bathroom doesn't get locked, our stadium stays open for the community to use the track. So now we'll be guaranteed that it'll shut down and lock.
And if need be, if someone said, hey, we needed it for 4 hours and they only needed it for 2, you can still lock it back.
Yeah, we can change it. Absolutely. And remotely. So I can do it from home.
Right.
I had a question for Zero Eyes. I'm still learning about it. Will it only detect guns or any metal, like a knife, a hammer?
It's guns right now, but they are working diligently to try and improve what they can actually detect. So one of the things that they talked about that they do is whenever they have somebody making a ghost gun and things like that, so they try and get their hands on those type of things that they can detect it. But that is their ultimate goal.
I have a couple questions. So I know you said that you added the networking for the restrooms, but you also say you ran it into concessions. So does that, I don't use a concession stand very much, sorry, but does that allow like cashless, I mean, they probably have it already, but can you do cashless? And at the ticket booth, does that allow them to be able to, have more technology up there? Because I know
It does,
they
and
don't.
I'll let Mark can speak to the tickets, because I think they're already
Right,
paperless.
with the ticket system for the football games, it's run through hometown ticketing, which is essentially an app that
Okay.
we use. We're not necessarily, there's no, it's all wireless with the app yet. As far as like the cashless system, we're trying to move more and more towards it as we get more and more, seasons under our belt. Running the network into there will allow us to have our laptops if we need to look up somebody's name. If somebody says, hey, I did purchase it, we would then steer them to somebody at the desk to say, okay, can you look them up? And they'll go to the website. Our people will go to the website and look them up. It basically allows us to put a computer in there, a time clock in there for our employees to clock in and out, especially with Joe's security guys and custodians working the game.
Okay, kind of like a will call type of
Yes,
situation.
exactly.
there.
Yep, to assist in the whole cashless
Yep.
process if there's an issue.
I probably should have mentioned we are going to do that blacktop area, so it was the perfect time for us to saw cut and go across. At the point of, even if we didn't have any big plans for a network there, well, I would have still suggested running it, because we're going to redo it, and I might as well put a hard line in there. We know, The access points can be volatile at times, so at least now there's a hard wire over there.
Okay. Had one more question about the middle school with your new utility shed. Are there, I know it seems probably going to seem trivial. Are there any plans to paint it? To kind of, yeah, they kind of go more with the flow of what we do here at Colonial?
That's a great question, because we try and stay with what we deem or use in the facilities, well, earth tone, and then let somebody else tell us, like, okay, what color do you really want it to be? So yes, we could, generally speaking, like we did the same thing with the school store, and then we worked with the art teachers at the middle school to put a mural in the school store and do things.
Kind of cool.
That is a perfect candidate, to your point, for that. But I've been through where we pick the color, and I think we've all done that, whether it's Home Depot or Lowe's, and then when you get it on the wall and you're home, you're like, that's not the color.
Right.
So I figured get it on site with just simple earth tones, and then we can make adjustments from there.
Yeah, I mean, no problem. Like I said, it's probably trivial anyway, but just, you know.
No, some school pride would be nice, like you said. I think there's some ideas that we could go there, but I'll talk with Sean and see. I know we've done some work with the art teachers there that's been really productive.
Nice.
Right.
Back where the homes are there.
Right.
Keep neutral.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is really minor, but the stuff that went to the bus depot, like in the barn, do you need that space? Like, what's the long-term plan? And if you don't have one, that's okay. Like, is this stuff just going to sit there in perpetuity?
So the furniture itself?
Yeah.
The plan for the furniture is going to be that, again, as many chairs and desks that we can use, we will put into this project, because they are 2 years old. So they're maybe 2.5. They're in very good shape. So that the plan is to actually utilize those desks that we purchased for the social distancing during that bad word, to actually put them into play when we open classrooms here at the 4-5.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't know if they're donating them or something, but if they're.
And then metal shelving, just because we went through, again, the district office did a great job of purging things. When everything's said and done, they will go back up on that second floor archive room, and they'll be back up there for more storage.
Yeah, we'll replace as needed. We just lack storage, and when we had the barn over at the bus depot, it was a great place to put things, and we did buy added furniture with the federal funds that we received. At a future board meeting, I will be, since we're going to be renovating here and the district offices will temporarily be vacated, we'll give the board a blueprint of where every department will be for 6 to 8 months while we're out. Most of the departments will be in the middle school or the high school, but we are taking advantage, and we need a separate FMT meeting for this. There's a home on the property of the bus depot, which we want to use for two purposes. One, temporary offices for district office, specifically business office, transportation, makes perfect sense because they're right there by the hub. And then after we vacate that and move back here, Joe's team right now is working on that home, which is a fairly sizable home built in 1910, and they're renovating it. And our goal is to make that, the basement of it right now, a technology hub to replace and repair technology equipment so we can get it back out to schools. And then the first, second, and third floors for transition programming for our life skills and autistic support students, because that is an area where PDE, when we get audited for special ed, is constantly looking for improvement in services, transition to life. And so to have a working kitchen, working washing machines, office, those types of things, to learn those transitional skills for our community-based instruction, that's going to be essential. So it's a plan Karen and I have been working on for a couple of years. And so the work that's going into that now on the short term will be temporary offices for some administrators, but long term as an educational facility on our on Belvoir Road. So that'll be great. And we'll do a tour. You can't take a tour of it right now. Definitely can't take a tour right now.
Yeah, we're not ready.
You would not approve it for educational purposes presently.
Yeah.
But we need, it's an asset that the district has, and we need to take advantage of it.
And if I can just add for more clarity, Jeremy, there's two sides to that barn. The front side of it that actually faces all the open fields, we actually have our lawn mowing equipment and things because we have to maintain the field. So we have one half of it where that'll probably stay the same with our equipment. And then the other half, as Dr. Christian said, the old middle school, if some of you remember, were there for all the props for plays and things. The basement was the entire footprint of the building. So that basement was that was the storage for the district. So that's what kind of left when we built the new middle school. So this has been a nice find for us.
I have a question. The building that you were just referring to, that home that's on there, are we going to be doing that in-house, like the?
We are.
So just to maybe keep in mind, you have an architect class at the high school with students, and you have the tech school right up the street.
Oh, yeah.
If there's any way that we can, use that as a life, moment, teaching moment.
Sure.
For that.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Do you have any transportation items, Mark, this evening? And that is the last item on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lally. Anything? All right, that will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Is there any public comment on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. So this represents tonight the fourth budget presentation, one of the more exciting budget presentations from my perspective, because we're in the home stretch, right? We've had multiple discussions about the upcoming 2024 budget, 24-25 budget. Very confident in the numbers that we've presented to date. So this presentation should be fairly similar to the last one because there has not been much movement as far as revenues, expenses, but more of an informational standpoint as to now how do we move towards that final budget process. So as I stated, tonight is the fourth budget presentation, and what we are looking for tonight is approval from the Finance Committee to move to what's called a proposed final budget. This is not necessarily going to be the final budget, but is what PD terms the proposed final. The proposed final needs to sit for at least 30 days for public inspection, public view, questions. They can call my office, email, anything that they look at in terms of the proposed final. It needs to sit for 30 days, and because of the way our board meetings are scheduled between April and May, we only hit about 28 days. So the April 18th board meeting will be the adoption of the proposed final, and then we will look for the final budget adoption at our June meeting, well in excess of our 30-day requirement for PD for inspection. So again, just to reiterate, tonight we're looking to move the final proposed budget out of the committee meeting tonight. Just to give the committee again another refresher, and like I said, some of these slides are going to be representative of what we've talked about in the past, but I always think it's a good refresher. Our total fund balance as it stands right now is $26,500,673, of which approximately $12 million is sitting in the unassigned and $14.4 million is sitting in the committed or assigned bucket. As what we talked about before, there are different funds within the committed and assigned bucket. There is our PSERS, Employer Retirement Stabilization, Healthcare, OPEB, and Tax Assessment Appeals. These dollars are assigned just for in light of extenuating circumstances when they come up to any of those different four items. There's also what's called the assigned bucket, which represents about $4 million. And those are for non-recurring expenditures if we were to use that to help mitigate certain tax increases at certain levels if the board were to choose. Again, as a reminder, Colonial sits at third lowest in Montgomery County at 25.02 millage. Prior year only represented a 2.56% increase year over year. at which we were the sixth lowest in the county in terms of increase in millage. So currently at 25.02. This is just a refresher of where we were and then where we are tonight in terms of different levels of projections between revenues and expenditures. You can see at the March 04 committee meeting, we had showing a deficit of about 2.7 million. And over the last month, with taking into consideration any potential changes for revenue expenditures, we don't really see anything on the horizon. We did talk about Governor Shapiro's proposed budget with his increase in basic education funding, as well as the tax and equity advances. Colonial School District will not be privy to the $871 million in new money that is going forward in terms of the Basic Education Funding Commission recommendations. Within the budget for basic education and special education, Colonial would only see a proposed $240,000 increase. And again, it's just proposed. I'd rather wait till the chickens are hatched before we kind of lock into that number. And again, $220,000 does really move the needle on a $158 million budget. We'll hope that we do get 50-60% of that, which is basically historically where the Commonwealth has landed. But again, I don't want to count on that before we actually have a little bit more information. Again, our revenues by sources are, for the 24-25 budget, $125,939,840. That represents a bulk of our revenues. You can see we bring in about another $26.8 million and $2.2 million in federal and state revenue. But again, our budget right now for revenues is $154,989,000 and change, which represents about a 2.54% increase over prior year. Locally, again, driven by local dollars. And when we talk about our local dollars, you can see, and again, a lot of this is regurgitative of prior committee meetings. We sit at about $125 million in local revenues. A bulk of that comes from current real estate taxes, from our residential and commercial base, and our earned income taxes of about $12 million. So again, our local dollars are driven, which we are very fortunate to have, a very strong tax base and earned income taxes from our working population. There you go with the presentation. I apologize. Okay. State revenues, our budget for $26,801,797, an approximate 4.95% increase. This is driven by the $537,000 increase in the resident or in the retirement state subsidy, as well as the basic education state subsidy, all based off of prior years. Again, while this is representative of $26 million, this is on the lower side compared to our local revenues. Total federal funding, which we've talked about in the past, the title programs will continue to run year over year, but we are moving into the last year of our ARP ESSER, in which we are projecting to spend the remaining $1 million. This will be spent on one-time money, so we don't make sure we don't want to lock into personnel or other, carrying costs. So that'll be something that we look to spend down. And as that grant does spend down and finalize and we close out, we'll do a wrap-up summary for the entire committee to see where do we spend the approximate $6.4 million since the COVID-19 pandemic entered into our lives. Factors to consider related to the budget as far as expenditure standpoint. Obviously, the other side of the ledger. We continue to track enrollment, our contractual obligations and salaries and employee retention, changes to staffing. As we've talked about before, this budget includes the addition of 2 regular education contracts and 1 special education contract. That obviously, of course, is tied to enrollment changes. As that enrollment changes, possibly over the next month, we may see an alteration in that, but we think we're pretty steady with those 3 additional contracts. You can see the PSERS rate. I just wanted to give a quick historical snippet there of, for every dollar that we spend on salaries, what is the district's required contribution to the PSERS fund that is maintained by the Commonwealth. We've been fortunate over the last 2 years that we've seen decreases. However, we're still hovering around that low 30 to 35% increase, and we'll see how that goes. I think that rate is going to be somewhere around 30 to 35, throughout my career, and hopefully by the time I retire, it hits 29.99. But we'll see what happens with that. Healthcare costs, as you can see, we were fortunate in which the first look represented a 9.1% increase, and then the second look came down to only an affected increase of 8.38%, so a little bit of savings on that in terms of from the first look. As the committee recalls, we did have a debt service refinance for our 2018 general obligation bonds, which just closed last month, and we're seeing a little bit more than $100,000 in savings in terms of our debt service. So that has already been pushed through our budget for 24-25. And our VOTEC program, as previously discussed, related to the back bill of approximately $339,000. From a global standpoint, in terms of expenses, we are looking at $158,174,696, representing a 4.65% increase, or approximately $7 million year over year. And when we break that down between wages and benefits, and then all other expenditures, as we've talked about, wages and benefit represents 71% of our entire budget. So for every $100,000 we are spending as a district, $71,000 is going towards wages and benefits. And you can see the breakdown between those two line items year over year is about $5.3 million. When we look at all the other line items from professional services down to debt service, this is where we really try to get into needs and wants with our departments. We need to make sure we are supporting their education. We want brand new trucks. We want 85-inch, TVs. We want to make sure that we're spending those dollars in the classroom and not so much more the want categories, as I try to call them. So Dr. Christian, myself, department heads really comb over those expenditure requests and make sure that we're drawing that definitive line between the two. And to wrap it up, again, this is going to look similar to the prior presentation, but with no real movement between revenues and expenditures. Projected revenues come in at $154,989,062. Expenditures, $158,174,696. And using a fund balance of $400,000 still leaves us in the deficit position of about 2.7. How do we bridge that gap at $2.7 million? We are recommending and requesting to come out of committee tonight an increase in the tax millage of 2.63%. That will bring the millage rate from 25.02 to 25.678. What would that do to our community, especially when we look at different levels of assessment? At 2.63% on a $100,000 assessed house, you're looking at a tax increase of $65.78. At a median assessed value of parcels in our district, it would increase $101.19, and on the higher side of $200,000, $131.60. I also do want to remind the committee that we also did extend and continue the senior citizens low income tax rebate program. So the effects of this 2.63% would or could potentially be mitigated by that senior citizens rebate program, assuming that they can file their PA 1000 and it would be approved by the state. We would then match up to 75% of that. Then that's information we put in our letters through the winter and spring newsletters. And the committee also allowed us last year to put pamphlets in every tax bill. So when every homeowner last year got their tax bill, they also got a flyer in there that said, call Mark Dejan. He will walk you through the senior citizens tax rebate program. And we almost doubled the number of rebate checks we sent last year. So when you're out in the community and potential conversation happens and the question becomes about the increase in the taxes, I encourage you to educate them on the low income and senior citizens rebate program to help mitigate that increase in that tax bill.
Mark, just for my seniors, is 65 and older?
65. So the program represents senior citizens over 65 years in age with an income of lower than $45,000, a widow or widower over the age of 55 and under $45,000, as well as permanently disabled individuals 18 years of age and older under $45,000. That program is mandated, is regulated by the state, and then Colonial piggybacks off of that. So if the state approves it, the Colonial School District will review the application, review proof of payment, make sure that they actually did get the money, and then Colonial would then issue a rebate. And that would start July 1, that program.
Real quick, so I know you said, as we're in the public, if someone asks us, give them a quick reminder and that kind of stuff. I'm probably not going to pull that off my head. So, do you have like a quick high level thing, and then like maybe like 3 bullets, and then like
I can get
your
you something
information at the bottom? Yeah, exactly.
No,
So just so
I can even
something I
give
can
you
carry in my pocket, just for like, oh yeah, actually, absolutely.
I'll
you know,
take the
whatever.
flyer, I'll whittle it down to a couple bullet points, and absolutely I can get you that.
Thank you.
But just to elaborate on that, like I said, every tax bill that we mail out has a one-page flyer, summary, contact information, not just for us, but also for the state. A lot of good information there, but I'll get absolutely the committee something to, in the grocery store, a quick 3 bullet point thing. As far as where does 2.63% tax increase compare to where we've been historically, as well as the base index in which we are allowed to go. And you can see historically, we've been at 2.56 last year, 1.67% in the prior year, 2.7, 2.6 the last couple of years. And this year we're asking for a 2.63% increase. If you look at current year or current month inflation rates in the United States, it's at about 3.2. So we're also happy to be under that number because of everything else, people have to pay with 3.2 inflation at the grocery store. 2.63, I think, is something that is a good start, is a good talking point to have there. And then what would that do to Colonial School District in terms of comparison to all other school districts? Again, at 2.63, it would move us to a rate of 25.678, and assuming every district does not move their millage at all, we would still be third lowest in the county. So that's something we want to make sure we're mindful of because, we greatly appreciate our tax base and we want to make sure we're always attractive, especially to new people moving within our school district. So that's a huge selling point to getting people to move to Colonial School District. Key factors, not much has changed in terms of from the prior committee meeting other than the continuation that was approved by the committee and the board for that senior citizen rebate program. We have no new debt instruments and borrowings built into the budget. We have our contracted student transportation services built into the budget as well as contracted through 2031. We have our student enrollment anticipated costs, investment in our additional professional certified staff, our bargaining unit contract, which with CEA, which extends through 2028. These are just the really key factors when we look at what is built into this budget. Labor piece, transportation piece, no new debts. Really good bullet points to put out there. So the next step, the top 3 are ones that we will always continue to monitor, and we have been monitoring. But as I said at the beginning of the committee meeting, the approval of the proposed final budget will be at the April 18th, 2024 school board meeting. This is just the approval of the proposed. This will allow the budget to sit for inspection for the minimum of the required 30 days, at which point at the June 2024 school board meeting, we would then move to look for adoption of the final budget. We do have the ability and latitude to change the proposed budget from April 18th to June. PD does allow that. So if the question becomes, well, why are you allowed to change it if it's proposed final? That's just the ability PD does give to school districts. We just have to get something out there and then also discuss it at future meetings. So that's what we're working towards between now and June, and as well as now in the upcoming school board meeting. So we're looking at a 2.63% tax increase that we would be requesting coming out tonight.
So I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One is, do you know if any progress has been made with leveling the cyber charter payments?
That
with the
was
state?
in Governor Shapiro's budget request. He's requesting approximately $8,100 across the board for all cyber charters. We have about 9 students in our cyber charter programs. We have more students in brick and mortar than we do cyber charter.
Okay.
But obviously, as you can imagine, at regular education of $19,000 and $44,000 that we pay, an $8,100 level playing field would have a drastic impact on us. As well as other school districts, but I think that's a hot topic at the Commonwealth and Harrisburg, and I'm not sure where that would go in terms of his budget proposal.
And then how are we doing with kindergarten registrations since the last time we talked?
They're coming.
I mean, does it look like we're heading towards
I'll double
meeting?
check right now while we're talking. Lenore's been out on personal leave for the past few days, but I'll check. But last I checked, we were over 300. So, well, last year we had 450 to start the year, so it's still March, it's still April, so about the same.
And because I did notice that you have in that budget 2 regular ed and 1 special ed
Yes.
new. So I just was curious what it might look like from a
So
kindergarten.
it's budgeted. We haven't appropriated them yet. We know special ed is definitely going to be needed, but where the other 2 may fall, it depends on the enrollment.
Yeah, sorry, just a quick one. I appreciate all the thoroughness with this. This is really helpful. I think one thing to point out, which is good, right? So if I read slide 16 correctly, if we increase 2.63%, we'd still be almost 5% lower than upper procurement, correct?
Yes. And that's assuming Upper Park has no change.
Yeah,
to the
correct,
village yet.
correct.
So,
Which I'm just gonna guess it won't,
right,
but
water cooler talk, just about every school district in Montgomery has to increase. Special education hits a lot of school districts, as you can imagine, very hard. There are maybe 1 or 2 school districts on here that may benefit from the funding, from the findings of the Basic Education Commission, that $871 million. There are 2 on here that could potentially drastically see some large dollars, but they're way up on the list. And it's the question that they're having, or the problem that they're having, is that it's just proposed. So I believe one of the school districts, I don't want to name drop, is proposal to get $11 million. How do you budget for a potential $11 million windfall when you don't know what's going to come out of the Commonwealth? So that's going to be a struggle that some of these districts are going to have, because if you have an $11 million windfall in new money, how does that affect your tax rate? How does that affect your staffing? What do you look to invest that in? But yeah, Jeremy, to your point, yeah, we would still be sitting, almost 5% lower already.
So kindergarten as of March 25th was 329 registered by breakdown by school. Conshohocken 51. We ended up last year with 59. Plymouth 95. For whatever reason, Plymouth generally lags behind because we ended up with 150 last year. Ridge Park is at 89 presently, and we ended up at 136 last year. And White Marsh is at 94. We ended up at 120 last year. White Marsh generally registers the earliest, followed by Conshohocken, Ridge Park, and then Plymouth, because of the number of apartments. We generally are looking at 50 to 60 kids from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So I suspect grade 1 ended up at 480 last year. I think we're a little on pace, probably for 450 at least. White Marsh is the biggest concern from a facility issue because there's only 5 third grades leaving White Marsh, and we currently have 7 kindergartens, 6 first and 6 second. So we could be looking at maybe a temporary classroom there, possibly, depending if we get to that 6th or 7th section. It should level out after that. We try not to put art on a cart or music on a cart. So we'll keep an eye on that. But we also try not to send kids to other districts or other schools and keep them in their home school. So we'll keep a close eye.
Okay, great. For the next item on my agenda is the informational budget. Again, this is the monthly comparison of where we currently are in terms of budget for the current year as well as the prior year. Beginning with revenues, as of March 31st, 2024, local revenues are at $119,047,990, representing 96.25% of budget. State revenues come in a little south of $15 million, and federal revenues about $1.8 million. Total revenues year over year, total revenues comparison for current year budget are at $135,818,164, represent 89.85% of budget, very comparable to prior years, overall 89.95% of budget. This is going to sound repetitive as well, but I will always continue to beat the drum on delinquent, transfer, and interim taxes, as we've talked about. They are continuing to lag, again, because of the turn down from coming out of COVID with the so many properties turned over between either residential or commercial. If you look in the detail slide of the revenue analysis, you can see that transfer taxes are almost 38% lower than prior year, representing $822,000 in decreased revenue. Interim taxes, which, as you can imagine, also associated with the turning over of properties, represent $500,000 less than prior year, 36.06% lower. And then delinquent taxes, again, $434,000 in the prior year. Overall, our taxes are continuing to come in strong at almost 3.99% year-over-year increase. This is driven by our interest income, our very strong tax base in terms of current real estate values, and amusement taxes, and the IDEA program. From an expenditure standpoint, we continue to process payrolls in accordance with our bargain unit contracts, and benefits are also still in line with prior year. As we've talked about, prior year represented that healthcare holiday. So if you take into account the $1 million difference that was given up when we used our fund balance, we're right in line with what we expected. The two items I did want to bring to the committee's attention is Object 300 as well as Object 400. And within our Object 300 is our special education costs for professional services. With increasing our numbers, we also have an increasing number of special education related costs, one-to-one aids, behavioral, OT, PT, emotional support. We've had to bring in numerous contractors to help support our kids, especially at the elementary levels at White Marsh and Conshohocken. I actually went down to White Marsh and Conshohocken last week to take a look at the programs, meet some of the staff we have there, and talk to them and say, what is lacking? What do we need here? And I did qualify my statement by saying, if you had a blank check, all right, I didn't want to give away the barn there. What do you need? And their biggest thing was, they needed equipment. They needed sensory room swings. They needed sensory room boards. And, that's something I'm going to continue to work with Karen Burke with. But we want to make sure that we're staffing as well as providing services for those programs. So within this special education, in that 300 object and that 500 object, you're going to see dollars increasing because of the investment that's not only required, but as what we feel is most appropriate for our students. So as far as an expenditure standpoint goes, as of March, we are sitting in overall at $98,907,888. It's a little bit higher than prior year, which was represented 62.83% of budget, and we're at 65.44% of budget. Again, it's being driven by these special education mandated required costs that we just have to invest in, and we want to invest in, that we're making sure we're providing for our kids. Just again, looking at some of the notes from a detailed expenditure standpoint, as I mentioned, the processing of the payroll, the special education, and then to Mr. Lowry's presentation point, with the additional security trucks and the work that him and his team did with the trenching of the lines, with the fiber and the cable, we're seeing an uptick in our equipment and maintenance and repairs costs. These are conversations that Mr. Lally, myself, and Dr. Christian have to make sure we're investing in our facilities, because it's a lot more advantageous to get to the repair now than to wait 6 months when it could be potentially a bigger problem. So we're just seeing an uptick in some of our repairs and maintenance costs in terms of expense and line items. From an overall instructional support, community services, transfers, and other funds standpoint, you can see right now we're sitting at about 52.2% in terms of instructional. That number is getting driven down because of the transfer out that that the board and the committee authorized. Just as a refresher, we transferred almost $6 million out to the CES renovation fund. That was a discussion we had. Instead of going out and borrowing new debt and putting that burden on the taxpayer to come up with that almost $6 million, we transferred out $6 million out of the general fund, not only to alleviate the need for new debt, but then also to get in accordance with PDE's required 8% over fund balance measurement. So that's just what's weighing that instructional line item down. And I'm expecting that number to come back up as we get more into our remainder of the year in terms of payrolls. Just to give the committee a little bit of education, April 1st, obviously, as everybody knows, is April Fool's Day, and I send out an email to all principals, and I tell them all your purchase orders are frozen, no new purchase orders, no new supplies. Some of them think I'm joking. Some of them have been around the block long enough to know. What we want to do is we expect all of our principals to staff or to buy everything they need at the beginning of the year. Right? Go buy your calculators, go buy your pencils, go buy your your erasers and everything. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see somebody saying, "Oh, all of a sudden I have $20,000 left in my budget. I'm going to go buy all new calculators just because I want new calculators." I'm not saying that happens. I just don't want that ability to be there. So I did put out my annual email saying this is not an April Fool's Day joke. Purchase orders are done. If there is extenuating circumstances such as PSSA testing, community events, family, related events, anything that's grant funded, we want to, we approve. But if anything comes up to use of the general funds, we do look to have conversations before we just go spend that. So that's kind of where we are currently now with the 23-24 school year. Any questions on that presentation?
Yes, I have one question.
Yep.
With mall taxes,
I'm sorry.
does it something like the mall with the taxes, does it matter? Is the tax rate change based off of the businesses that are there? So versus retail versus amusement?
The commercial base pays the same tax rate that a residential residential home would pay. So Legoland pays the same pays the same tax rate as AMC. They also pay the same tax rate as Mr. and Mrs. Joe Lally that live in Colonial School District. Yeah, everybody pays at the same rate. There is no tiered rate.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot program, the Resolve Room at the middle school, I know we had talked at the last CRSL meeting about potentially moving a program into the high school as well. Does that look like something that is doable for?
I believe right now we're in the final stages of applying for the grant to get the funding for the Resolve Room, and the intention then would be, and Dr. Christian can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, is to use that funding for the pilot program at the high school, and then see how that runs out in terms of how we want to administer that, and that'll be obviously up to Dr. Grigaitis and Dr. Bacani. Yeah, but we're just about there with securing the funding for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, if there's any other questions, that will conclude my agenda for tonight.
All right, are there any other board comments? All right, are there any public comments this evening? All right, seeing none, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.